Hello, this is Martin Garkson, Communication Professor at Colorado State University and the Director of the CSU Center for Public Deliberation. This is the third of three videos, serving as just an introduction to deliberative engagement, to the work of the CPD, and also to the work of the Kettering Foundation Center for Public Life program, basically a nationwide network of organizations, of bridging institutions, mediating institutions focused on elevating the quality of public discourse. And helping democracy work as it should. So as I said, this is the third of three videos. Sharing my screen here real quickly. The first video focused on talking about the basic reality of wicked problems, explaining the concept of giving lots of examples, essentially making the argument that most of the tough issues that we're dealing with in our communities can be best understood as wicked problems, which the very short version is that they have underlining kind of competing values that don't naturally fit together, that really require us to have high quality communication and collaboration to kind of be able to deal with them better. The second video was the bad news. Looked at social psychology and brain science about how our brains are just not wired to handle wicked problems, that we prefer certainty and simple good versus evil stories and to gather around kind of like-minded people. And really a lot of the institutions and the processes that we rely on politically are also very poorly suited for wicked problems and take these problems and make them a lot worse. That led to basically this unfortunately vicious cycle of polarization and partisanship that is making it hard to talk about any issue. So this last video is the hopeful news. It's the argument that once we understand those first two arguments, once we start seeing issues through a wicked problems lens, and we understand kind of how our brains work and how our institutions and processes tend not to work, then we can start kind of building the kind of capacity that we need in our communities to have the kind of conversations that we need. So this last video will kind of walk through that. Lots of different ways I can do this last video, so I'm going to touch on a few things. I'll talk about a few resources kind of as I go along the way. But the overall idea here, earlier I kind of walked through my research on brain science. These are the kind of the negative trends and how our brains are so wired towards partisanship and polarization in so many different ways. But when I went through all that research, there's also good news, right? And when you start looking at kind of how our brains work, there are kind of several kind of positive kind of trends in a sense. Now, I will say most of these positive aspects are secondary. It's easier to trigger the negative. It's much more basic or much more involved. That being said, the basic point is good process can get to these, right? And that is kind of a two-step process. That if we can avoid bad process, we can avoid triggering the worst in human nature, and then good process can actually bring out the best in human nature. And that double move can make a huge impact in the kind of conversations we have. So some of the kind of key aspects, the positive aspects of human nature, is we are inherently social and seek purpose in community. We are not kind of self-interested, kind of individualistic in a way. Now, the bad side of the social is the groupishness, the tribalness, that can define us versus them. Some of the worst things humans have ever done has been based on kind of our social aspect, but also some of the best that we've done, right? So that's the importance, kind of a good process of shifting, instead of kind of adversarial groups coming out, of bringing out collaborative groups. And for me, particularly, the move from a national focus to a local focus has really facilitated that. The national politics, Democrats and Republicans are the two primary kind of teams, whereas in the local community, maybe it's your local community. And you actually kind of build bridging capital and connections across people versus those primary identities kind of creating a lot of conflict. Highlight Daniel Pink's Drive here is a really interesting book of looking at what really kind of motivates us, that we want purpose, that we want to mean, we want community, we want mastery, right? We want to be good at things. So some of the really interesting research coming out in positive psychology, the concept of flow, that humans are at their happiest when they're doing hard things well. So part of what I'm hoping to do is for more and more people to realize, living diverse communities well is something you can get joy out of. It's hard work, but it's joyful in a sense. And I think the more we get a small cadre of people that really see that, it can make a huge impact on their communities. Second, we're inherently empathetic. We are naturally connected and we feel things like justice and empathy for people. So how do we kind of bring that out as an inherent part as we're having these conversations? We want to connect with people. And probably the most important one is that we are inherently pragmatic and creative. This, I believe, is a defining feature of the human species, but we rarely get it. We rarely, unfortunately, have process design that taps into this. Much more likely to tap into the simple kind of good versus evil story. And if we have that simple story in our head, we don't have to be creative. We just have to vanquish evil. But when we switch and we take away the wickedness from the people and we put it in the problems, this is where we start tapping into this wonderful aspect of human nature. And then lastly, our brains, while the negative is much more easy to trigger, our brains can learn, can develop new habits, can make kind of new connections. The more our brains do things a certain way, the easier it is to do the next time. So this is a real positive kind of long-term thing. The more we deliberate, the more that we work together, we learn how to work together, the easier it'll be. We can really build up a culture in our communities of this kind of work. Earlier, I talked about in video 2, talked about the backfire effect and some of the scary research that shows that facts don't change minds. And actually, in an adversarial relationship, the stronger your arguments, the more it may backfire, the more that it'll polarize. But what the research does show is people can change their minds. The most likely way to change people's minds on a tough issue is with a genuine conversation with someone they respect. That's when they have that aha moments. And those of us that are practitioners have seen this time and time and again, where people come in with the blinders on, come in with a caricature of the other side, but then sit at a table and have a conversation. And at some point, there's that realization that, oh, that's why you think that way, right? And they still may disagree. They still might think that I've got it right, and you don't quite have it right. But that shift from assuming the other side's evil or has negative motives to, they have good motives, right? They just don't quite have everything right. That's someone I can have a conversation with. That's someone I can work with. That's someone I can collaborate with. And that's the kind of relationships and situations we're trying to kind of put people in, right? So what is this deliberative engagement? Lots of different words for it. Lots of different fields kind of connect to this in a lot of different ways. Some of the basic principles are pretty typical. This is kind of a chart, a deliberation wheel I created, going to a lot of interdisciplinary conferences over the years, meeting people from all over the university that have kind of shifted their work to focus on this notion of collaborative problem solving and deliberation or democratic governance in a lot of different ways. It's also a very extradisciplinary movement, very active in nonprofits and different kind of community organizations and professional organizations, all again focused on elevating the quality of public discourse and public decision making. Like the CBD, that they're focused on elevating the conversation versus winning the argument. So I'm going to fly through just some web pages here of some of the key organizations. This is the National Issues Forum Network, which is tied to the Kettering Foundation and the Centers for Public Life. I show this in particular because you see the broad range, a lot of them on campus, but coming from community colleges or cooperative extension or an equity and diversity program or community and leadership development or communication studies, honors program. So all over the university, kind of unique kind of connections to this work. The Kettering Foundation is a key player in this work, really kind of sponsoring and being a great convener or bringing people kind of together. National Issues Forum develops material and has great training to do this work. The National Coalition of Dialogue and Deliberation is kind of the broadest umbrella group that really brings people together. It does this work, a wonderful website, a great conference. It's going to be in Denver in November of 2018. Public Agenda, Everyday Democracy. The UNDP has a democratic dialogue kind of program that does this work international. They have a 300-page workbook that's available online for free. Lots of organizations that work to kind of bring, reunite kind of the divided America, reuniting America, the American Democracy Project, the Democracy Commitment, Democracy U, the Democracy Imperative, the University Network for Collaborative Governance. All these organizations, again, are working kind of bringing people together, focusing on process to spark different kind of conversations to help us take on difficult problems, wicked issues much better. So what actually is this? So this is the definition that we use here at the CBD. The notion of deliberation is a form of public engagement. It's not just citizens, but citizens working with experts and working with politicians. Kind of all three together are deeply involved in the process. Often working with facilitators. This is a key aspect of the review of human nature. it's hard to do this on our own, right? Our brains are not wired to deal with conflict in this way. So having facilitators, having someone at the table who's designing the process, who's putting all their time and their energy and their expertise into helping us have the conversation can be critical. Those experts use a variety of deliberative techniques, or 2-hour events and all-day events, and multiple different ways that you can kind of bring people together face to face. Consider relevant facts and values, and both of those are important. We need facts, we need good information, we need to use data well, but we also need to talk about our values. The issues that we're dealing with inherently involve competing underlying values, and we can't just say, values are something that are personal. You're not supposed to talk about those. We have to talk about those values inherently. And coming together, consider those from multiple points of view, to honor kind of small d democracy that we're seeing lots of different kind of perspectives there. Deliberative processes are designed for people to listen, and that seems obvious in a sense, but most public processes not. Most public process is designed to give people a chance to speak and to express themselves, and very few are actually designed for people to listen and learn from each other, and that's a big shift that we'll be talking about. That processes that are focused to really bring out those underlying tensions, those tough choices, the various consequences that get hidden so much in public discourse as we frame things simple and good versus evil, and my side's good and your side's bad. So laying out those choices and putting them on the table and help people work through those is kind of an essence of deliberation, of really looking at the different things that we hold valuable and how they don't always fit together all that well. Deliberative processes are assuming people are willing to refine and adapt their opinion. They're willing to learn. So they're not just coming to express their opinion. They certainly have the right to do that. But the idea is, through good conversation, through exposure to good material, they'll refine their perspective. And this is a key aspect. We don't need just public input processes, because as we've seen, particularly with the second video, people's perspectives or individually developed perspectives are often rather biased. So we need processes that help people refine their positions. We need public learning processes, public engagement processes, not just public input. And ultimately, the idea of deliberation is coming together to make decisions together. They make decisions about collaborative action from a broad range of actors, recognizing that all the information won't be in. There's not going to be a right answer. There's not a magic bullet. But to develop kind of notions of wisdom and judgment, of how to make good decisions with incomplete information as we work through, and to keep that conversation kind of going. So this work kind of really can be thought of in two broad levels. The more kind of specific level is the public forum, the event, of bringing people together. You see the picture on the bottom of people kind of walking through and having this kind of communicative experience. And then a broader kind of systemic kind of view of deliberation that I'll kind of touch on a little bit afterwards. But the actual events the CPD runs and organizations like it across the country have some kind of key components that all kind of work together. There's an overall deliberative framing on how we talk about the day from the front of the room. I, in particular, talk a lot about wicked problems and lay out multiple approaches, get away from a simple yes, no, kind of do you support or not support a specific policy. We inherently talk about a broad range of actors, and if possible, we start the discussion upstream, help the community kind of define the problem versus go straight to a solution. Particularly because once there's a specific solution we're exploring, people tend to kind of pick a side and then they stop learning, right? They turn their brains off. So how do we engage people before they're polarized so they can kind of learn together and refine those opinions? Most deliberative events have some sort of discussion guide or backgrounder, something to react to. So we're not just relying on the opinions at the table, but we could design those. And the power of having a document that's designed for deliberation, it's designed to spark good conversation rather than being designed to persuade you in a certain way, can be a powerful thing in multiple ways of helping people address that conflict in productive ways. National Issues Forum in particular does a really nice job of developing these national issue guides in a particular format. Lots of other organizations kind of create similar guides. Local centers like the CPD often develop their own that are really specific to the local issues that they're doing. But these discussion guides are kind of key tools of the deliberative perspective. Deliberative processes tend to rely on small, kind of diverse representative groups, which can be the hardest part of our work of getting those groups in the room. But again, you see the picture here of having the smaller groups. So it's not just one at a time in the microphone. It gives a chance for the interaction, for the discussion. That's so critical. And then obviously there's facilitators. The CBD program, I get to train these undergraduate students to be our facilitators that run these kind of public events for the city and the county and nonprofits. And that's kind of an important capacity that the communities need to have, is to have these group of people that have the skill set and have the mindset really to, again, put all their time and energy and expertise into elevating the conversation and making that important contribution to their communities. And then lastly, processes are designed for interaction and learning, that we're not just trying to capture people's individual opinion, we're trying to refine and improve their opinion. So one way to think about this, traditional forms of public engagement tend to either be the government kind of informing citizens. Now we've developed all these input processes of surveys or citizen comment time. There's actually rarely much interaction, right? There's not much back and forth in a sense. If you look at a citizen comment time, it's just all the citizens speak. There's not a lot of back and forth. But this ends out being is just an individual collection of opinion, right? Of individual people kind of yelling at government, often each with their own kind of blinders on, and it's a very kind of unproductive form of discourse. So the work that we do for deliberation is actually have the citizens talking to each other, right? Put them at the round table. And then that discussion broadens. So there's certainly kind of part of that discussion was what's the role of government? What's the role of nonprofits in the private sector? And what's the role of experts to help us with? And we build that broader notion of democratic governance. Another way of thinking about this is we're trying to spark interactive communication and getting away from the individual collection of opinion, the one at a time in the microphone, the expression of simplistic, often biased opinions. So these are three broad forms, the 3Ds: debate, deliberation, and dialogue. Obviously, deliberative engagement focuses on deliberation, but in a lot of ways, it also relies on quality debate and dialogue. All three of these are kind of interactive. All three of these are not natural, right? At least we don't do this well naturally. So having process people that design this, that are moderating or facilitating these processes, can really help. Yeah, and we need debate elements, right? Because debate elements help us kind of distinguish between a good argument and a bad argument, and where the evidence lies, and those type of things. And we need good dialogue processes, because that's what helps us develop the kind of relationships and the trust that we need. But neither of those are sufficient on their own, right? Debate without relationship falls flat and it backfires. And dialogue without any sense of quality of argument can kind of turn into a lot of talk, but we never actually make decisions. It's almost too open-minded. So deliberation tries to bring those elements together and focus on how do we kind of make decisions together. Once again, though, the problem is we can't do this on our own. It's very difficult. We don't tend to have these skill sets. So that's the role of these centers for public life. That's the role of these organizations, these bridging institutions who are focused on process and focused on helping us in our communities have these kind of conversations. All these components have to be kind of supported and developed by individuals or organizations that don't have a dog in the fight, that are willing to kind of commit a lot of time and effort to improving how their communities discuss this. So in that vein, I've developed this concept of passion and partiality, which is purposely an oxymoron, right? But the idea is that we're impartial. We don't have a dog in the fight. We're not pushing our community to any specific decision, but we still are passionate, right? We're passionate about our community. We're passionate about small d democracy. We're passionate about solving problems. But we're just going to put all that passion, all our effort into the process rather than kind of picking a side. So passion and partiality is kind of this constant negotiation that we do, that we want to honor impartiality. We need to build that reputation so we can change the conversation. We need to be seen as an honest broker of information. But we're also going to honor, kind of on one side, honor equality and inclusion. We're going to honor those democratic commitments, that democracy means voices are being heard and not just the powerful. But we're also going to honor sound data and reasoning. So one's kind of the debate side, one's kind of the dialogue side, or think differently, one's the expertise side, one's the democracy side. We need both of those, and they're going to constantly remain in tension here. We can't let the experts dominate, and we can't just kind of let popularity kind of dominate, but we need to kind of work those together. So we're constantly negotiating the tension between those three things as we design our processes and run our processes and kind of go through. So the last thing I'm kind of touch on a little bit, and this is broader. I've been focusing on the forum, the actual event, the actual real people talking to each other. But there's a lot of steps that happen kind of before and after that, which are critical. And these are steps that are also kind of supported by these organizations. This is the work that the CBD does kind of behind the scenes. So the Kettering Foundation captures these, and these 6 democratic practices, which are very useful to think about all these tasks that have to be happening in your community in one way or the other to really elevate the conversation. So one is just naming issues, to name issues in a nonpartisan way that bring people from across perspectives to really think about that aren't kind of from the very beginning biased, that capture kind of people's values and concerns. And then framing issues is the art of that, creating the discussion guide, of figuring out how do we kind of get away from the polarization and getting away from the simplistic kind of narratives and actually start kind of digging into those trade-offs and thinking broadly about potential actions. And then making decisions deliberatively is kind of the hands-on kind of at the event in a way. How do we actually weigh those trade-offs and make those decisions? As kind of after the part of the discussion and moving forward from talk to action, really identifying what are all the key resources in your community that can be part of this discussion and part of the move to action. And yes, government's a key tool, but it's one tool among many. And a lot of deliberative processes really can kind of wake up the community and make new connections and see the possibility of nonprofits and religious institutions and civic organizations and new organizations and new coalitions coming together to deal with issues more productively. But that kind of work takes organization, takes skills. Collaboration sounds great, but it's difficult. So a lot of these centers kind of develop the expertise in supporting and working as backbone organizations to help the process as we go. And in some way, this whole kind of cycle is just a collective learning process that communities must constantly be undergoing. It's a democracy, going back to the very first video, has to be an ongoing conversation, that we have lots of values that we want to honor, but those values don't fit together very well. So the more we kind of elevate the quality of the ongoing conversation in our communities, the quality of our community will increase. And these organizations with the Kettering Foundation are organizations that are kind of put all, again, their energy and helping support these 6 democratic practices, which tend not to get enough support kind of on their own. So I'll kind of close here with as you do this work, going from the first video to the third video now, and as you replace kind of these practices that bring these negative kind of practices with these deliberative practices, you can see 4 powerful shifts. The first is shifting from the assumption of wicked people and the motives of those who disagree with you to wicked problems. When you put the wickedness in the problem, it starts changing the conversation. And that process connects with, instead of citing the worst of human nature, our blinders on, our craving for certainty and simplicity and good versus evil, to bring out the best of human nature, to bringing out our creative problem-solving side, to bringing out our broader social side and our sense of empathy. And most importantly, I think, when you shift from an adversarial relationship, which just sparks problematic thinking and simplistic kind of views, to collaborators. When people shift from being kind of face-to-face to shoulder, it sparks a whole different way of talking, a whole different way of thinking that can be much more productive. And in particular, for those who are interested in kind of facts and data, this last move, when we're adversaries, data is just ammunition. But when we're collaborators, facts are tools for solving problems, right? We shift. So we don't just need better facts. We don't need to yell the facts more louder and louder. We need to change kind of our relationships. And when we change those relationships, then facts will matter again. So the second video kind of walked through this vicious cycle, this negative feedback loop that has kind of increased our polarization, our partisanship. I'll end with the good news that there's a virtuous cycle, that we know that the more you do this, the easier it is to do. And when we give people an opportunity for authentic engagement, to actually really have genuine conversations with other people, they start developing mutual understanding. They knock down the caricatures of the other side. They stop making the assumptions about motives. They start building trust and respect. And once you have understanding and trust and respect, then the process is, instead of just kind of talking past each other, people start learning from each other. People start creating even new ideas in a way. And that creates that potential for collaboration and co-creation that's so critical for our communities, so critical to be able to take on the kind of wicked problems that we need to do. So that's the end of this video series. I'll put some links on the Q&A. People can kind of email me and ask more questions and get involved in this, and a lot of the different organizations that I'm involved in that I kind of show, those all have it's a field that shares like crazy. So I hope you get involved in this field and take a part in really kind of focusing on helping our communities elevate the quality of public discourse, so we can do the kind of work democracy requires. Thank you.